I want to start off with congratulating our team, the Evergreen team. There's not a person in this room or in the building that didn't help today get this all, The other thing that's pretty amazing is I got asked, we did a little interviews down in our little video studio, and I got asked by Jenna, I don't know if Jenna's in the room, and, she was asking, tell me a moment that was really special about PodFest for you and the times you've been to PodFest. And I was kind of stumped until immediately I remembered being in Orlando and the pandemic was just breaking out. So it would have been March. And people literally had roughed up knuckles from the amount of sanitizer and soap. Nobody had the masks, and a lot of people weren't sure how they were going to get home. It was just one of those moments. But what I also realized is I met one of the largest groups of colleagues at that one festival. I don't know what brought it that way, but we're now in a small group called the Podcast Network Alliance. And I'm pleased to say we now have a number of those folks a part of the Evergreen family. So it's really exciting just to have an event like this and realize how we've grown this network like a family. How we've been able to bring in independent podcasters that are just starting. And then most recently, we've scaled to where we're bringing in a whole network from Japan for our Voices of Japan launch this fall. But we didn't really take a different approach. We had an approach where I want to say of all the companies and corporations I've been a part of, and this is my 6th startup, this is the most real. And podcasting is probably the most real of the industries in media I've ever been a part of. People are down to earth. People want to work together. They, for the most part, check the egos at the door. And they get to work. And I'm looking around the room, and there's a lot of people here that have done some amazing things in here. We have award winners. We have IdeaStream in the room. These are all our partners. Let's give a hand to IdeaStream. And so we're just so happy to have you here. It's really special. We had a quick call. It's like, I've got to stop in November. Let's go with November. And that's just how quick it came together. And that's what I love about Chris. He's a community builder through and through. When we first started going, and Gerardo can attest to this, we were like, wait a minute, I thought this was PodFest. But Chris has actually incubated other communities and other festivals like Video Fest and Military Con and all these other things. That's what kind of community builder he is. He'll go above and beyond the podcasting community to build other great circles of creatives. So I could read his bio, but I would rather you just hear from him. Chris Krimitsos.
Thank you so much. So we're on our 10-year anniversary show. We have literally had an in-person event for the last 10 years. And part of the reason, what David just mentioned, is our 2020 show happened 7 days before the lockdown. So we had an in-person show. And then 2021 happened later on in the year, much smaller, but we haven't missed an in-person date. It just worked out that way. So it was a really great thing. We have amazing speakers coming up. For those of you that would like to come to PodFest, we would love to have you. It's a really great community. But the timeline, I'm just going to share a couple of, so you could understand where we're at in the history of this conference. So this was PodFest pre-COVID, pretty amazing. But this is how we started. August 5th, 2013, a meetup just like here, 13 people. Rick Lievensbach every year would buy the first ticket. So he was known now as ticket buyer number 1. This tradition happened, and then we'd get like 5 people buy the first 5 tickets. We'd give them special privileges. But he would make my team open up the ticket gate for the next year so he could buy it and then ask him to close it back. So that's the kind of thing. So we have a lot of special angels in our community and a lot of like threads that you don't see but are there. So during COVID, Rick got sick with leukemia. He was doing great up until the end. And he's still ticket buyer number 1. So we retired that program, but he's still looking down at us. But that's kind of what, and I know Dave has met Rick. He would give me a bag of Lifesavers at the end of the show, always, just as a thank you. He's this very, you ever meet someone that's an adult but never lost the essence of a kid? Like when I say innocent, like pure innocence, that was Rick. Like, and sometimes he taught self-defense. Sometimes he'd teach you stuff. Like, I didn't ask you, but he was so happy to show you. He was just a pure soul, so he was just amazing. And that's when the seeds were planted. I was so passionate about podcasts and what it could do for people and the message that we literally just taught anyone and everyone that would listen, to the point where in the early years, and Dave Jackson, by the way, we have a legend here, Dave Jackson School of Podcasts. Let's give him a round of applause right here. That's it right here. How many years?
18.
18 years he's been podcasting.
The OG.
Oh, anyone longer than 18? Going once, going twice. Yes, so we have one more.
I'm already back here.
There you go. So we have a couple OGs in here, so just be very proud that Cleveland has a lot of history, and people like Dave Jackson School of Podcasting is who we would look to. This is one of his peers who also is an OG, Steve Cherubino. We formed our first ever PodFest, 100 people came to it, and then the next year, we basically, this was in Tampa, Florida, we doubled in size, and this is a really amazing picture, and I want to share with you what happened in year 2 of PodFest that changed the trajectory of the conference. We had a gentleman in the front row who was a trucker / like tugboat captain, bald. He sounds like you would think he would sound like Grizzly. And at the end of the second PodFest, this guy was almost in tears because he had felt the community. And I've done a lot of events. When that person is almost in tears, something's happened to the room where people bonded. And you have to understand, in the infancy of podcasting, this was a very pure platform. And the question all of us were asking at this conference is, are we allowed to charge to make money on something so pure? And I know it's funny to think about it now, but at that time, it felt like we had this gift that the heavens had bestowed upon us with this amazing audience. And the relationships were very unique because everything was so fresh. So at the end of the conference, I was like, I can't end this conference when I see people that are like, I don't want to leave. Like literally, you could feel the whole room, and I'm very good at reading energy. They didn't want to leave. I said to them, there's a microphone up here. It actually looked just like this. We had it on similar mic stand. I said, if anyone would like to share what they're grateful for, feel free to come up to the mic. And as you would imagine, no one showed up. So I'm standing up there after I had said that. And then this is something you learn as a communicator doing events. I said, for those of you that know you want to say something, but you just said to yourself, it's probably not worth me saying, then you definitely need to show up. And the whole room stood up, and I had to put a second mic, and everybody lined up. Just by addressing the noise in everybody's head, but everybody had the same, I want to say something, but it's probably not worth it. That gave birth to the gratitude ceremony. So the closing keynote of PodFest is actually the audience themselves, still to this day. So we close out now. It's a gratitude brunch on Sundays, but a gratitude ceremony on Sundays for the people who want to stay after. The audience closes out the show by telling us what they're grateful for. One of the greatest gratitude, and you'll hear, I know Dave will tell you, you'll hear the craziest stories. You're like, wow, I didn't know that happened. But one of our favorite people, his name is Maxwell Ivey. He's known as the blind blogger. And sometimes we have a treasure map that you take and you have the exhibitors fill out so you can win prizes. Well, Maxwell's blind, so he can't see the treasure map. So when he came up to the mic, he goes, I want to share. I'm like, oh, please be good. I don't know what's going to happen. And he goes, I knew that I couldn't read the map, but Chris always says that this community is here to help. So he asked the first vendor to sign it. So he had someone take him to the first vendor. Every vendor in our exhibit hall took him by the hand to the next vendor, and he got his entire treasure map signed. Wow. I wish I would have known it before, I would have kept it and framed it. I don't know where that treasure map is, but he came up to share that every vendor took him by the hand and made sure he got his sign. That's really special that the culture is not only the attendees, but actually infuses the people that are exhibiting because they're part of our community too. So this is the year we took it from, we created The Messengers, a podcast documentary. We actually crowdsourced a movie. Who's watched The Messengers, a podcast documentary? Dave is in it, yeah, Jim, there's a bunch of, so if you check on YouTube, just look up The Messengers, a podcast documentary. We made a full-length 59-minute movie. And the reason why we made that movie is we got tired of people telling us in the early years in an audio-only platform, I don't see what you're doing. And we kept hearing it over and over. So we made a documentary so they could see what it was about. Dave Jackson actually made a podcast of us making the movie. And that is one of the most drama-filled podcasts. He would attest, right? It's the most drama-filled podcast you'll ever hear. If you go on YouTube, because we took it off of Amazon, there's multiple copies. We gave it to the community to share. We moved it to Orlando, and that's when we had the showcase of The Messengers, and we doubled in size. And all along the way, we kept growing in size, helping our friends launch She Podcasts at the show. So yeah, just so people know, we come from an abundance mindset. So we believe that everybody could do better together without taking away from anyone else. It's really, and sometimes it's a little bit radical. People think there's an ulterior motive. For us, we think we could all grow together, so everybody does well together. This was the 2020 show, and what you're looking at is the largest, this is the meet and greet where it's the largest connection of creators that you'll ever see in a room sharing how they could help each other and collaborate. So I had an actuary a long time ago figure out a formula because when you deal with a high percentage of introverts, how do you do it where they don't have to think about what they're gonna say, but you could direct it from the front and only one person speaks at a table of 7, so that way the whole room could hear. So I had a couple of mathematical things, and I found this guy that's a code breaker, like that's what he does for a living, and he broke the code for me, and we have a whole numbered system that works. So what happens is you have a number assignment, you only move 3 or 4 times, but you'll meet about 28 people for the first time, and that breaks the ice for everybody in the room. It's really special. And then that takes us to, so here what David said, we're on a high, flights are getting canceled, no one knows they're gonna go home, we go home.
Gerardo was there.
Yeah, we know that we're probably going into some kind of lockdown, but we don't know what yet. And we get home, and I don't know about you guys, but I watched Tiger King and let my hair grow out. I gotta tell you something, we went from this to me holding Tiger King meetups on the PodFest group, like who wants to talk to Tiger King? And I forget that I'm from Tampa. Carol Baskins is in our group. She was already in the PodFest group. So we're talking smack, and she's one of our members. I felt so guilty because when you're watching a movie, you think you're talking about fictional characters. These people all live like they're all there. But I'm sure she was busy with other stuff. But we're like, what do you think? What do you think? Anyways, for those of you that didn't watch it, save yourself. It's okay. So that's when we said, let's do virtual and see if we could get everybody together and see if we could recreate the magic that we just experienced here in virtual format. And what we did was we rewrote the rules of how we wanted to run a virtual event. And we followed like kind of how the technology might work, but we created new rules to how we wanted it to work. And we got different people involved, and we were really excited. This was in 2020. These are numbers from 2020's virtual PodFest, and we reached people all over the world. And at the end of it, we were very fortunate that Guinness World Records awarded us the largest virtual event in the world. The next year, we shattered that record. Thank you, David. Now, I will tell you, I'm grateful to our American audience because when we crowdfunded those tickets, we were able to give out thousands of tickets to people all over the world that might not have been able to afford the tickets, depending on what access they wanted, but it was amazing. And we've met so many amazing people from it. Last year, we did the PodTour. So many of you have friends, business consultants. I was told I shouldn't do it. It's not feasible. It's not economical. There's no one sponsoring it. Why should you do it? And sometimes in business, I agree that you should always have an objective, but it's not always about money. Our community didn't start with money. It started with 13 people at Mimi's Cafe. And we'd have the muffins and, they had good food. So I said, I'm going to put the word out. And the way we got to 20 cities, we started with 3. And then other people called up and they're like, how about our city? It's like, if you could help us get there, we'll do it. And it became really successful from where we went from, Chicago, Austin, you name it. This year, it's gotten up to 25 cities, but the numbers have grown. And anywhere we go, we have so many amazing people, and it's because of great grassroots local support wherever we go. So that's what we're at today. And the reason why we do this is how PodFest was built. It was built out of a meetup with 13 people. So we would never want to lose sight of that. Right now, PodFest is anywhere from 15 to 2,000 people, 10-year anniversary, if not more. So we want to make sure that the connections happen here on the grassroots and they continue at the big show. And that's just how everything goes. If you'd like to get a PodFest pass, I do have tickets I'll give you personally at the end of this, but that's the QR code. So now what I'd like to do, and there's meetups that get created. So this is a meetup right after hours. David is in here, I think, somewhere. William Hung, do you guys remember William Hung from American Idol?
He's there. He loves the party.
For those of you that don't remember, he had like, she bang, she bang.
Yeah.
So like, there's a lot of characters that show up at PodFest, and you're like, is that like, yeah, that's who that is, like when you're thinking. He's a hit, people love him, and he loves coming to PodFest. He's just a lot of fun. This is one of my favorite stories. So we met Wally Green. Who knows Wally Green? Who met him? Yeah, you met him at PodFest. So Wally Green is a professional ping pong player. We met in the New York City meetup last year. And that's why we're doing this again. We met so many great people and so many great characters that you could not meet anywhere else. So Wally grew up in the streets of New York. Really crazy story. He was thrown out of his house as a child. Was a gangbanger, had to protect himself on the streets. And one day he went in a pool hall, because that's where we would hustle to make money to survive. And he saw a group of kids playing ping pong. And he's like, and they were all white, and he goes, I think I could beat them all and make some money. So he learned ping pong, and an Israeli guy saw him and said, can you train me? You look really good. Can you practice with me? He paid him to practice. And then the gentleman said to him, the story is long, but he said to him, I'd like to take you to Germany to learn how to play ping pong. And he said, I was the outsider in Germany. I go, how's that? He goes, I'm American. He goes, everybody was German. So it's interesting. He has a very unique perspective on the world. And one of the things that you learn from Wally, he's traveled the world. One of the coolest things he did was he went to North Korea. And he said, I'm going to play ping pong in North Korea. No one went with him. He went by himself. All his friends are like, hey, man, the Germans are like, I'm not going, good luck, right? So, and they love to travel, right? You know, they love to travel. Like, I'm not going, you go. The Americans are like, hell no, I'm not going to North Korea. He's like, I'm going to Korea. And the reason he went to North Korea is he wants to be ambassador for not ping pong, for goodness. The only thing I could, like, just being good, friendships. And you realize North Korea has the best ping pong players in the world. Because if you're not good, there's consequences, okay? As he's saying this, like, I'm picturing it, because I'm just like, oh, why are they the best? He's like, well, if they're not good, things happen, right?
Jeez.
So he knew the guy was better than when they're playing, and the crowd hates him. And I said, why do they hate you? He goes, because I'm American. They hate Americans. So he's painting this picture, and what he realizes in the moment is if he plays angry, that's easy because it's coming natural, because they're giving him anger. Or he could play with grace and smile. And he smiles, and the whole stadium opens up and winds up loving him. And at the end, he gives his opponent a hug. The guy did win. He did say they're the best in the world. Like, you're not going to beat a North Korean for the most part, from what he was saying. The guy couldn't hug him completely, because, again, there's consequences to that. But he won over the whole room with a smile. So I'll see him in 2 days. He owns He owns some of the most trendy clubs in New York City where you play ping pong and have drinks. His investor is Susan Sarandon. So I think he just bought the old Caroline's Comedy Club. So he's booming. He's got some amazing things going. So I can't speak right now, but I'm pretty sure he'll be at PodFest. He did ask me, so this is at PodFest. He asked me, can we get a ping pong table? I said, absolutely. We got a ping pong table. He would play you with a broken old iPhone, and you had a paddle. And he didn't beat you, he just wanted you to enjoy the sport. Like I said, he's an ambassador. So at PodFest, I know we're here local in Ohio, and I know we're thinking like US. You have to realize PodFest, there's people from all over the world. So this one gentleman from Dubai was coming in with his entourage, and he was a big health and wellness influencer. And there's podcasters, you have live streamers, you don't know what following they have, and there's so many different verticals, you just never know who you're talking to. And I said to my friend, hey, when the guy from Dubai comes in, just make sure he's welcome, say hello from PodFest. But we didn't know he had 6 people. He had like an entourage. You couldn't get to him. So my friend Tyler in Atlanta, who marches to the tune of his own drummer, he goes up to the guy and somehow sneaks through the entourage. And he says to the guy, do you like ping pong? The guy goes, ping pong? And he leaves his entourage and starts playing this guy. It was like a scene out of Forrest Gump with the guy from Dubai. He's now sweating. It was incredible. He still won with the broken phone, but the Dubai guy gave him a run for his money. Now, why my friend said, do you like ping pong as the opening line to get past the entourage? Sometimes it's divine intervention, like of all things to say. Yeah. Do you like ping pong? And he goes, ping pong? He just left his entourage. So anyways, there's a lot of like funny things that happen behind the scenes. And then there's a lot of after parties. These 2 gentlemen are part of the creation of podcasting. That's Todd Cochran of Blueberry, Rob Greenlee, who's been part of many different things. So you'll be hanging out with really amazing creators, but also the people that were there 20 years ago when it was created, the top, what would you say, Dave, first 50 podcasters or whatever? Like, they're in that group. This gentleman actually was complaining on one of his early podcasts about, like, it's not good enough, and Steve Jobs called him and said, give me the feedback. I mean, that's how, like, people don't realize, like, Steve Jobs, he wants to know, like, tell me what the problems are, because he was fixing the early, am I right, Dave? Because he told the story. It is crazy. So it's just cool to see. And then we have amazing exhibitors that you could talk to. Now, I'm showing you this for one reason. When you're at a podcast conference, if you're not talking to the exhibitors, you're missing out on some of very easy lift to grow your show. You don't know what initiatives they have. So because podcasting is very collaborative, they know, many of the exhibitors know, that they're looking for a niche person, let's say for Evergreen. They know but they also have resources and they have tips that they would love to give you. And if you spend some time talking to the exhibitors, you never know what they have to help promote your show unless you ask. And I've seen entire exhibitors that have playlists and they create carousels for independents where you get hundreds and hundreds, sometimes even thousands of downloads if you're hosting with them or you know them, and they'll tell you what the initiative is. So it's really rich networking. All right, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna get to the top 10 tips, and I have a sheet for everybody. So what we do, by the way, if you wanna learn how to hook up an actual podcast from startup, School of Podcasting is here. I highly recommend his website, but he has all the resources. You have a link, right, on how to, like what kind of mic to get and all that stuff. Where would we go to see the equipment side of it for someone that's a beginner?
schoolofpodcasting.com/myequipment, I think is the link.
Schoolofpodcasting.com, buy equipment. Take one, pass it around. All right, so top 10 tips. So we crowdsource across the PodFest universe to give you top 10 tips. General tips, but tips. Podmatch.com. This is one of the best places if you'd like to be a guest on podcasts or as a host, find guests on podcasts. I think he has the paid tier is $23 and there's a higher tier. But the reason why I mention this is I get a lot of business people who come to these meetups and they go, I want to be on podcasts. If you go the agency route, which is a private boutique agency, the investment is $5,000, sometimes $12,000. Podmatch does that for a very low fee. It's great to try it out, see how you like it. Alex Sanfilippo, who has been with us from the very beginning, he actually read my book, Start Ugly, and then told me, I think I'm going to quit my job and start something. I said, hey, let's pause a second. You know, you just read the book. But he all I said to him is like, because tech companies, very labor, I said, test out the idea before you spend all kinds of money. And he did. He did a type form and he listened to the audience. It's probably one of the best tools. Also, it's amazing how he bootstrapped it. Now it's one of the top tools in the industry. This is a gentleman that actually created some coaching for people that want to be a great guest on podcasts. You'll have to take a picture of this link, but simplesuccesscoaching.com/podfest. He created a free training. This is not ours, but I trust him. A lot of people will, his name is Dustin. A lot of people will refer to his training as some of the best. So check it out. Let me know how you like it. But he created something for people to learn how to be a guest on podcasts. All right. So this is something that I've seen a lot of recently. And I was on a committee for a business group, and we were bringing in this speaker. His name is Patrick Bet-David, and it was for business tips. So we had to go to his conference to see what kind of business stuff he covers, because we didn't want to touch anything political, just business stuff. So I got to see him interview Tom Brady. And this is an example I want to make sure that all of us understand. So Tom Brady, it was the first time he talked about his professional life and kind of looking back at a career of football. And one of the things that Tom Brady said, and I was there in the room, it was magical. He was never, he was always the underdog, almost like all the way even to the end where they traded him to the Bucs and then he won a Super Bowl. So Tom Brady said, I was never the best athlete. He goes, almost consistently throughout my career, I was never the best athlete. And I know a lot of us know this, but hearing it from him, he didn't pick up football till his third year in high school. He said, one, he was radically naive. So he never knew what was possible, so he never thought about like the odds. And two, he said he always maximized his potential and he was always consistent. Those two things, he was maxed potential and always consistent. So then Patrick would ask him in the interview, hey, Tom, did you set out to win Super Bowls? He goes, in a football team, you can't set out to win a Super Bowl. You got like 50 teammates. The whole team has to win. You could be the best that you could be, but the whole team has to be good. So he goes, I was just prepared for every play, every down, all the way to the end. And I had a very good system where we were able to win continuously. So anyways, at one point he asked him, are you driven by your enemies? And as I just told you, he said he was internally driven. So when Patrick asked him this question, I thought it was very odd because it wasn't congruent with how the interview was going. For those of you that are interviewers, you know what I mean. Sometimes you have interview questions, you'll scrap it because you're like, that doesn't play because he just answered it in a way. And he said, Michael Jordan had 6 rings and you wanted 7. He goes, no. And he goes, again, in football, a quarterback, even though we have control, we don't have that much control over how the game's gonna go. It's a whole team effort. There's just too many people coaching and everything. Now, when they dropped this episode, okay, this was the #1 clicked video, and I'll tell you why. They probably tested their content before they ever created that interview, and he was gonna ask that question before the interview was done, because they knew short form, that would get clicks. So what I'm saying to everybody here, if you're doing long form interviews, are you thinking about something you could ask someone that would drive, on a short form, drive people's attention so they could listen to it? And I know what some people are thinking, Chris, this is great, but I'm not interviewing Tom Brady, right? I'm gonna give you another example, it's just very simple, nuanced. I have a pet parrot. Her name is Emmy. She's a yellow-naped Amazon. I've had her for 26 years. So she's amazing. We love her. She's part of our family. There's a gentleman. The #1 question I get, there's 2 questions. What do you guys think the #2 questions you get asked if you have a pet parrot?
Does it talk?
Does it talk, #1? What's #2?
Does he swear?
Oh, that's part of does it talk, but that is correct. How long do they live? Almost like upset, like they go, this is how it starts. I've heard they live a long time. How long do they live? That's almost like I can tell you verbatim what I get asked. So if I was to interview the top expert in the world for birds, his name is Tony Silva. I have his books. He's out of Homestead, Florida. If I said to him, Tony, in the middle of the interview, how long do macaws live? And he says, categorically, undeniably, by my stats, 60, he knows this like to the day. He's like, 60 years, the mean average, blah, blah, blah. Now you might be like, why is Chris saying that? If I took that piece out and I made it maybe a video bite, social media, it's gonna get 1 million views. It's one of the most asked things. So when you're interviewing subject matter experts and you know that they could answer one question that only they could answer in the world, you should be already thinking about your short form. And I do go to YouTube conferences. They intuitively think about it because the YouTube algorithm trains them to think that way. I'm not saying we should always think like that. I'm just saying take a little piece of it and let's not obsess too crazy over it. But if we could get a piece out of it, that'll help push your other content if you have great short form content. Another thing we get asked, Chris, do I have to have a lot of downloads to monetize my podcast? I know Dave's heard this many times. This gentleman, Patrick Kelly, he has the Produce Industry Show. He talks about produce, and it says here, and he'll tell you, he's really funny. He talks A to Z, literally asparagus to zucchini. Yeah. And don't even ask him about oranges. The guy could talk your ear off for an hour about the different kinds of oranges. He told me like which farm stand to go get a certain kind of orange. I'm like, how do you know that? Because that's my business, that's what I do. So he was a very successful produce broker, and now he has this podcast. This podcast does better than his produce business, and he's like 2nd or 3rd generation in this business because he packages his sponsorships as a value add for his sponsors. So it's not just podcast downloads. It might be I'll come to your trade show, I'll interview a couple people. It's a world of sponsorships that he packages. So he'll have a content sponsorship where he might come do some content with you. Anyone that if you've already purchased a ticket to PodFest or you know you're coming to PodFest, let me know. I will give you his deck. He said, if someone's coming to PodFest and they're gonna see me, I'll give you my private sponsorship deck. I can't put it out to everybody because he does want to be careful where it goes out, but he's the top show in the produce industry. And he does a great job of packaging his world. So all the top people sponsor him now. You name the brand, they're sponsors of his show. It's pretty incredible to watch. So that's a high-end sponsorship model that does really well. Now, he is very passionate about, like I said, produce. He could talk your ear off about it. This is my buddy Larry Roberts, and these are the pick for the AI tools that we see a lot of podcasters using. So this is, we always poll our audience, like, what are the top tools for podcast specific? These are the tools. And there's more popping up. You guys saw that X launched Grok last night or something, Grok. And then ChatGPT just did a huge update. They're having a whole developer conference coming up. Larry Roberts is our AI resident expert, so I always hit him up.
Midjourney up on there.
Yeah, that's right. We got to put, thank you, Midjourney for graphics and different things.
Good.
So make sure your show is easily discoverable via keywords. So a lot of people don't realize in the Apple algorithm, your keywords are very important. Now, 2 things. If you have an artistic title, I'm okay with that, but add some keywords to the subtitle, the subline, so I know that I'm in the right place. So here's the example I'll give you. So women, this lady does an amazing job with meditation. She has meditation for women. She has a lot of different shows. But I went to an event in DC a while back. Because I do PodFest, I'll always be introduced to the event planner, and I'm always looking for tips, so it's always great to meet a fellow event planner. They said, I just started an event planning podcast. I said, congratulations. What's the name of the podcast? And she said, it was named after her dog. I don't remember the dog's name, but that was the name of the podcast. And I said, is it about event planning? She goes, yeah. I go, why didn't you put event planning? She goes, there's a lot of event planning podcasts out there. And I said to her, who told you this was a good idea? And she goes, well, my mom and my friends. And I want to be very clear, two things. I'm not here to make anyone wrong. I'm not here for you to compare yourself lesser or greater than. I'm here to offer tips that we found that work in the community. So please don't blame yourself in any way when I go through these 10 tips. My job is for you to find something that you could implement. So I want to be very clear. Take that governor off your brain if it's making you wrong for something you've already seen that you should be doing. We all should be doing everything at all times, right? Just take one tip today and implement it. You'll be fine. So I just said to her, I said, in the food business, I'm Greek, so I grew up in the food business. Everybody had a diner in New York where I grew up. So I said, in the food business, there's a saying, you don't want to be the first restaurant in a place you don't know that there's customers yet. It's actually good to be in a hot zone where there's different restaurants because it creates an audience that loves to frequent that area. And I don't know if you guys know, but in the early days of the malls and the food courts, when a mall would have 3 choices, they found that when the mall expanded to 19 choices of food, the food court actually did better as a whole. Now, the thing I would tell you, though, is each one of those choices is plugging in a vertical for the audience, depending on what they feel that day. So if you see an audience and there's a lot of competition, all you need to do is find where do you fit in that audience and what is the flavor of ice cream you could deliver for that audience. So for my vegan friends, it would be like almond or coconut ice cream. For others, it'd be milk ice cream. So what's the flavor? There's so many different flavors you could deliver. And how are you going to package that flavor? So that takes some thought. Have you guys seen, do you guys know what Buc-ee's is, the gas station? Yes. Have you ever seen this gas station? It has 165 stalls for gas. It's the size of a Walmart, and everything's themed after Bucky the Beaver. Literally, it's got everything you could imagine. You go in here, it's incredible. So there was a martial artist in Florida that really made an impression on me. His name was Stony Stone. He had 6 inches difference between his one leg to his other leg. He grew up in the era of martial arts where he got the crap kicked out of him and he kept going. And he'd be bloodied and he has a serious disadvantage until he became a martial artist. And then he trained like 6 national champions out of his dojo. No air conditioning in Florida. So they were really tough guys. And I remember he said, most people don't functionalize their art. And I said, what does that mean? He goes, most people are copying someone else. Very few people take the time to think and functionalize their art form. Would you know it that the people he trained created their own style of martial arts? The Kali Arnaz school, like entire schools of thought that are taught in hand-to-hand combat and all kinds of stuff. So I would tell you, as creators, are we functionalizing our art? And are we thinking about what it is that we want to do along with what the rules that work and how we combine the two? Because when we put that together, magic happens at that intersection. Advertising on other shows. Many people don't know that you could run ads on podcast platforms to advertise your show. So AdvertiseCast is one of them, Player FM, Overcast, it's all listed here. Take a look at them after tonight. If you have a budget, you could advertise your shows. The easiest way to get discovered is promos amongst other creators. You create a little promo circle. Word of mouth, but like if you're already doing word of mouth, how else do you accelerate? Advertising is a way. And the reason why I like advertising on audio platforms, we know one thing for sure, audio listeners are on there. So only when you've mastered that, I would then scale out and do your social media stuff. But you know that there's listeners there, and that's important. This is one of my favorites. The PodFest Messenger, if you don't get this newsletter, it's really great. Larry Roberts puts it together. He's the editor-in-chief. PodFestMessenger.com. He has creative control, so all we ask him, we'll have advertisements that we put in at the bottom. But when it comes to the content, he looks at what's going on, and it's geared towards independent podcasters. There's also job openings for people that want to break into the industry. And then for anyone here, if you have a podcast, you want it featured, it's one of your tips. Email Larry at podfestexpo.com. We'll give you a shout out to our list of 20,000 podcasters, and we'll put a link to your actual episode. What I would tell you is make it memorable for us and the audience. So think of it as a Twitter feed or whatever platform you like, promoting something special. So if you have a great episode, promote that. If you have an anniversary, promote that. For those who haven't launched yet, we love promoting your first episode so we could give you a leg up. So hit us up. It's in your one sheet. This is something that you'll see in this place. Submitting your podcast to podcast award shows. Now, Evergreen does this superbly well. Not every network is as in tune as they are. And these, if you get submitted for these, and David could attest to this, it will give you a nice lift because people and media pick up on what's mentioned in these submissions. Now, I want to be very clear. I was a naysayer to the strategy. I was like, I don't think it works. But when you have, because we've done so many events, when you have one person, a second person, a third person telling you if you approach this systematically and you really believe in what you're doing. This one, I think the People's Choice Award is the longest running one, right, Dave? Todd Cochran started. It's on the internet. The reason why I mentioned that is if you're mentioned there, you're getting some really good backlinks to your site. And Todd does a great job of promoting people and highlighting them. He also, I don't know if it's him, but one of these, someone had a show that didn't fit a category. They actually created a category for the show. And then they found out, they said, do you know other people in the category so we could create it? So some of these shows are very receptive. So I'm big on this strategy, and I think it's an underutilized strategy that more people could do more of. I think what happens is we get busy, we're just like, I don't have time to submit it, but it's worthy of submitting it for recognition. Now, looking at downloads and learning from the analytics. How many people have looked at their downloads recently? Some of you have. Some people never look at the downloads. I know because I ask them and they're like, I haven't looked in a year. And that's okay. But you want to get into a habit of looking at the downloads. So this example, two things. I'm not telling you to start 17 shows. I don't recommend that for anyone, okay? But it's an example of what we learned when we looked at the downloads. So this lady, Katie, she's a rock star, amazing lady. So she started with meditation for women. She asked me to look at the downloads. I said, I think I could help you. I'll look at your downloads. And then she said, what do we do? I said, you have to, if I look at the downloads and give you feedback, I need you to act on it. She goes, okay. What show do you think we launched after I looked at her downloads? Shout it out, guys. Sleep, 100%. It was in anxiety. Actually, I wish we would have thought of it sooner. We just launched that recently, and it's already taken off. Sleep. And so it's up in these 8. What do you think we did after we did sleep? That was more logical, wasn't necessarily analytical. What do we launch after sleep? Morning. Morning, sleep, morning. And then we did much more research. Now, I will tell you, this is going to become right up there with sleep. The anxiety is huge. But what happens is, if you have a show, and I'll give you a term that I learned off of YouTubers, they call it bucketing. Bucketing is when they have a show that hits, like people are just like, we love this content. So for a podcaster, to relate it, have you ever had a person that's not a celebrity, but the audience just took to the topic? Who here have felt that? What they say, and this is what YouTubers say, you need to follow that up with 2 or 3 episodes just like that, fast, while people are hot. So you would shift your calendar if you already have things in the can to try and find 2 or 3 things so the audience could be fulfilled with what they want. At the end of that, you should see an overall spike on all your downloads, maybe 7%, 5%, but if you're plateauing, you'll see a growth. And that's something that's a really unique thing to do. Katie, my wife, is phenomenal. She's by the way, this is my wife when I say help her later. She's an amazing human being. Our kids are her first priority, and then this is her third baby, the network. But this one for panic attacks doesn't have a profit initiative. She's really big on helping women. And we had the panic attack meditation, but how are you going to find it? So she created it as its own show, just so if someone needs it, they could find it and get out of that situation in the moment. So that one's more of giving back. And then she started a couple kids that she plays for our kids at night and helps a lot of other people at night with the kid meditations. All right, so this is something that I'm going to give you guys. It's a fresh off the presses. The first half of the PodTour didn't get this tip. I will say this. You're going to be scared, enthralled, all at one. We're not here to address the scary part of AI because we could be here till like tomorrow at 6 a.m. just talking about, the AI revolution and all of us being replaced. But this tool, Bar used it. It's called Delphi.ai. It's in beta. Everybody at PodFest gets a first crack. Basically what this does, I'm not saying you should do it. I said you should check it out. It will listen to all your podcasts and it will create a clone like yourself to answer people. So if you go on the wait list, there's a type form on the website. If you use the code PodFest 2023, You'll get first crack at it. I believe we talked to them. They made a freemium for our people if you want to see what it's like. Joe Fear helped us connect the two dots together. If you go on his website, literally it's him, but it's not him. It's the clone that thinks like him. It's 90. They said it's 99. It's almost 0.5 accurate, but it's up there in accuracy of how he would answer. Join the wait list if you'd like it. You get a clone for yourself for your podcast. This is specifically for your podcast. So $1. This is a social media tip. So this goes for Joe and Matt for the Hustle and Spark Flow. Mess up the show name title all the time. I love them. They're amazing. But Joe Fear, this is his show. They call it the $1 a day Facebook ad strategy. So replace Facebook with your favorite social media. I don't really care. Let's say you interviewed someone famous. You could actually take that interview and then target their audience for $1 a day. You interview with them on social for 365 days. That video, that audio is growing with new listeners every day, $1 a day. Now you might say, Chris, I don't interview famous people. Does anyone here interview famous subject matter experts? You're going to target the people that are in that subject matter on social, and you're going to target that episode. Now, the key for this strategy to work, the people will listen. Like, that's no doubt about that, because they're already interested in the topic, so it's a very hot circle. But in the intro, when you re-record your intro, if you're going to do that with the show, you want to say up front, hey, thanks for joining us. If you're here to listen to da-da-da-da, I want to make sure you know that episode 53 and 107 also cover this topic at length. I highly recommend after you listen to this, you jump over to those. So you want to get someone into your listening funnel. So this works really well, $1 a day. So imagine if you interviewed Dr. Phil, or Dax here interviewed Dr. Phil, and you're targeting Dr. Phil's thing. And you want to drop, remember I told you got to pull out something that no one else has pulled out of Dr. Phil. It could be like, Dr. Phil, this is something I would ask. If I got him, I'd be like, did you ever have a moment where your relationship was on the ropes, where you thought you were going to divorce your wife? And what was that like? By the way, when I do interviews, I never apologize for the question I'm about to ask. So I'm like, I've done this so long, I don't mind asking very uncomfortable questions and just being quiet. So if he answers that question, that's something you could lead with. Dr. Phil talks about what it was like almost, breaking up with his wife or whatever. And that's how that works. And then people now are used to it. They'll click on it and they want to learn more. And there'll probably be some insightful nuggets that Dr. Phil gives you or whatever. So you just want to think about it in getting people's attention terms. This is my last one. This is someone I met thanks to Dave Jackson. Scott Johnson had the Computer Tutor podcast. Remember that, Dave? So he's a break and fix computer guy. He had one of the first podcasts called the Computer Tutor podcast. You'd call him and he would help fix your computers. We have a local meetup in Tampa. By the way, if you're ever in town and you want to visit us, we've been doing it for like 12 years, second Tuesday every month. Next Tuesday, I don't schedule around my meetup. We're at the IHOP across from the airport. Reason why we use the IHOP, it's an international place, so we have people from all over the world. And we won't change it for the world, like sticky floors and everything. It's an IHOP in the truest sense. 100%, man. You feel, JoJo's our waitress, we love her. But in case you're ever in town, if you hit me up, I'd love to have you as my guest. We charge $10 for the meetup, but you'll be my guest, so I'll pay your 10. I'd love to see you guys down there if you're ever in Florida visiting. But Scott is one of our regulars. We love Scott. So one day he comes up to me and he says, Chris, I'm seeing these guys at Evergreen. They got so many creative shows. I see what they're doing at NPR. He goes, I want to create something creative, something fun. I said, Scott, whatever you come up with, I'm sure it's going to be great. So I'm like, all right. And he goes, I want it to be in the true crime niche. Like that's the society and culture, true crime like that. So the one thing that Scott and I and all of us at the meetup, and this is a reflection on all of us, when a new person comes in, the first thing they tell us is, I want to create a podcast that's about everything for everybody. And we always have to say, that's great, but do you have a lot of marketing dollars to get people's attention, or can we start narrow and then work our way out? So Scott said, I want to name my podcast what I want you to think at the end of the episode after you listen to the podcast. So he named it, What Was That Like? Real People in Unreal Situations. So to give you an example of how powerful that is, because I travel the country, there's a lot of people that have a show title, and the show does not match the title. And instead of thinking, what was that like? I'd be like, what am I listening to? And if my brain says that, that show is incongruent with what you have. But this is how congruent his is. What was that like? So let me give you an episode. Jack went to Colombia, got involved with the wrong people. wound up becoming a drug mule, swallowed 5 cocaine condoms. One opened up in his rectum while he was in the air, woke up handcuffed to the bed when he came out of his coma. What was that like? And these are real. I'm not making them up, by the way. You think I'm making them up. I'm just remembering, like, I want to be accurate. Might have been like 3 condoms. Like, I think it was 5. But anyways, I got to ask him to reference it. What was that like? Another one was, and you guys have seen, many of you have seen this video. He interviewed the guy, the American that went to Switzerland to go hang gliding, and they forgot to strap him in. Have you guys ever seen this video? This guy held on for 45 minutes, and they're like, humanly, it's like impossible. You're only allowed, like, your body and physics, like 30 minutes is the cap. But he tore everything out of every part. Like, he tore muscles all the way down, right? Scott interviewed the guy. What was that like, you know? You go hang gliding, and they forget to strap you in. That poor bastard, when you watch the video, they kept getting drafts. And you see the guy just trying to get it down, and every time he did, it's like, they were back up. So 45 minutes trying to land this thing. And the moment they got off, he realized he just strapped the guy in. So you have to understand, Scott delivers on that promise every time he creates an episode. He only creates 2 a month. So I will tell you, I'm a big proponent of like every week consistently, but if your content's really good, you could get away with every other week like that, right? But how picky is Scott? One of the joys of my job is I get to meet people from all over the world. So for some of you that are brand new, you've never met me before, one of the things you're probably thinking of, what does this guy do for a living? Why is he here talking to us? What is going on here? PodFest is pretty big. So I make my living full-time with PodFest. We have a small team of 5 people, and we have exhibitors, and we have, thousands of people buy tickets, and then we do virtual events. So that's what I do full-time, just so you know. So it allows me to give to you the information that most people would charge a lot of money for that I see across spectrum. So one day, and also the reason why I mention that is I get to meet a lot of cool criminals, believe it or not, because they've repented from their crime, they're out of jail, and what do they all do? They start a podcast. That's what they all do, okay? So, and Chris is so giving, and he doesn't judge. Everybody says, talk to Chris. So one guy, I remember, I'm like, why don't you do this? He goes, dude, I just got into the halfway house. I don't have money yet. I'm like, but you're already like a big star. He goes, oh, these guys are making money off my story, but I'm gonna create my own podcast. So I'm a big proponent of people controlling their own destiny. So this one guy was like top 10 Secret Service most wanted for money laundering, anti-money laundering and fraud or whatever. So I said, Scott, I got a guy for you, right? Scott goes like this. A month later, I go, what happened? I served one up for you. He goes, he's done too many interviews. So like, that's how, like, when I tell you technically, he's already been on, the Dateline stuff, true crime. He goes, I don't want that. I want real people first. I want first, we first press olive oil. I want first press at them before they do anything else. So he stays true to real people and unreal situations. Now, this man, and I love this guy. At the end of last month's meetup in Tampa, he said, can I give something to JoJo, our waitress? Our waitress loves us. She texts me the day before to make sure she has our podcast meetup. She wears a PodFest shirt. I mean, some people are like, why is an attendee serving us? I go, no, she's a server. She just wears a shirt because she loves us. The new people always are baffled. Like, is this how this works? We got to serve next month? We get a PodFest shirt? So he goes up there, and at the end of the meeting, he said, he's built a community of people that love his show, right? He's got like a Facebook group. He goes, we all kicked in, and we wanted to bless a server this month. Now, what he didn't know is JoJo's son was in the hospital for a really bad infection in his ear. And he gives her $542 and blesses her with that. And she's crying, I'm crying. It was a moment. But he's been giving bicycles away for years. He just helps a lot of people. So this is a great example. So this is what I want you to think, because we remember stories, and I know this one will be burned in your head. When you create a show, think about Scott Johnson. If you're not saying in your head, what was that like? When he sets up the premise, he's not doing the show. And it's to the point where if someone already got media coverage, he doesn't want them. So he wants, and I mean, the stories he has he's got like, it's really unique stories. And he'll tell you some of there's some really dark ones out there. So I'm just telling you some of the fun ones. But the other ones they run the gamut from everywhere. I would love to see, I'm greedy. I would love to see all of you at PodFest, obviously. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you in Orlando.